Hi, I'm Jim Clark, Visual Arts Manager here at Hopkins Center for the Arts. Today we're speaking with Susan Gangsei about her exhibition, The Sacred Journey of Aging, on view now through December 1st, 2024. Susan, welcome.
Thank you. Thank you.
Can you tell us about the inspiration for this specific body of work?
Well, it kind of started back when I was kind of in my middle 60s, moving closer to 70, and I was feeling kind of anxious. I was losing things in my life that were important to me. My husband passed away from Parkinson's. I lost my career because I chose to take care of him towards the end. My kids were off. Stuff that I normally did, you know, I'm pretty active and physically fit, and you know, some of those abilities started to disappear, and so it was kind of a period of being unsettled and grieving. And as most or a lot of artists do, the way we process things is to come up with artistic expressions of what we're going through. And for me, it's the visual metaphors of what it's like to get older.
Sure. And have you always been an artist?
No, actually not.
Sure.
I spent 30-some years in corporate America, and I started just weaving, you know, on a floor loom about 25, 30 years ago. But as I kind of wound down my career and found a different way of kind of coping with my life, it moved into tapestry, and then tapestry into what I consider art.
So as you were in the midst of these life changes, was that the impetus for your artistic pursuits, that you were feeling something and you wanted to express it, or did you have an existing artistic practice just prior to this? How did that work?
Well, as I said, I started weaving quite a while ago.
Sure.
And at that point it was more of a hobby.
Okay.
And then when I turned 50, my mother gave me a class on tapestry weaving, and I really just kind of found my niche in that world because I could create images. And then while my husband was sick, I was doing images that kind of told the story of what was going on during that time. And then after he passed away, you know, this series really started because it was more around, you know, what was I going to do next?
Sure.
And what were the dynamics of going on in my life?
Yeah. What was your subject matter like before? How was it different?
Well, I've done 3 series, and the first series was very story based. I call it universal stories. In full disclosure, I'm a pastor's kid and have lots of biblical stories in my background. So I kind of picked stories to illustrate what was going on in my life that was represented in those stories.
Sure.
And then I studied with, I've studied with a couple master weavers, and then after the story series, I worked with or studied with a master weaver from Peru and did things that were very abstract.
Okay.
And then after that, I just kind of knew I had to sit with my own aging process and find out what that meant. You know, was it good? Was it bad? Was it both?
Yeah.
You know.
In the approaches that you took to your weavings prior to this series, did you synthesize those into this, or was this different technically as well?
It wasn't different technically, in the sense that I used the same technical process, but my images changed quite a bit.
Okay. And can you describe that process? Like, do you have a preconceived notion or idea how this is going to end up from the very get-go?
With this series in particular, usually as I'm struggling with something and kind of uncover what that is that I'm struggling with, a phrase comes to my mind usually. Mm-hmm. And so then with that phrase, I try to start saying, well, what's the image that communicates that phrase? So for instance, this one in particular, the phrase that came to my mind was, I've got one more card up my sleeve. Basically communicating that I'm not done. You know, I've got lots of years ahead of me. I've got lots of things that I want to get done, things that are important to do. And so with that phrase in mind, I started searching for an image that visually expressed that phrase. And so as you can see, there's a woman with a top hat, kind of a magician theme, and one more card up my sleeve. And that one in particular, I was pondering the fact that as I got older and after my parents had passed away, I still felt a connection with them, especially my mother. And so it was important for me to kind of say, well, even though people had passed away in my life and that I had lost them, they were still with me. And then after that, it was kind of like, well, how do I express that someone that's not there, who I can't hear and I can't physically talk to, how does that communication get represented? And so I came up with the element of Braille, because that is a way people who either can't hear or can't see communicate with each other.
How do you source the images?
All sorts of different ways. Mm-hmm. Sometimes I find a face that really, in my mind, expresses what I'm trying to communicate, and then I massage it and play with it and make it more abstract. I look for elements like a card or a magician's hat that kind of goes with the theme. Oh, there's one down there at the farther end where I knew of a Japanese ceramic technique where they fire a pot, they break it, and they put it back together with gold, and it becomes more precious in that process. And so I was thinking about how, even though I had lost things, other things had come into my life, or other things had resulted from those losses. And so I played with the image of putting together something with gold. Mm-hmm.
And when you say that you play with images, is that something like, do you draw things, or do you use a computer, or is it purely mental, like you're adding elements, just visualizing in your head?
Well, I used to draw things full scale, at this size, and I would get up on my patio window door and sketch, and then erase, sketch, erase, sketch, erase. But in the past couple of years, I've picked up some Photoshop skills.
Okay.
And so I can play with things digitally, and I can do revs faster, mm-hmm. and be more playful and collage things together and add elements much easier than drawing things out.
And then the technical process of weaving, you generate an image that you're going to communicate through weaving. How does that transfer? What does that look like? How do you get that image then into this? Yeah,
that's a great question. Once I have, let's say, the Photoshop image that I want to weave, then I do have to translate it into a pattern, mm-hmm. that I can weave. And basically I create, for a lack of a better phrase, I create a pattern that's like paint by numbers. Mm-hmm. And so I basically take this and I create all the shapes, and then I color code them, and then I hang a big sheet of paper behind my loom, and that's what I basically fill in the shapes and colors and image.
So it's a guy, you're just sighting it through the loom and eyeballing as you make your moves.
Yes.
Is that process a smooth one, or is there a good deal of, I mean, it seems like there's a great deal of potential for, oh, I got to redo this part.
Redoing is painful.
Yeah, I would imagine it looks it. But is it even possible?
But then you rip it out.
Okay.
So this one I wove sideways and from the back, and there are technical reasons for why I do that. It has to do with getting a good smooth fabric and getting the lines that I want. And so I went from here to here, and when I lay it in, let's say I went this way and I laid it in and I found a mistake back here, all that has to be torn out. So the way I do it is I spend a lot of time preparing.
Sure.
And I'm very methodical about how I put my pattern together, my cartoon together, so that there's less of a risk that I have to go back and tear everything out and redo it.
Have you always naturally been strategic? Have you always been a planner, or is that something that you developed and learned through weaving?
It probably came pretty naturally. I am a planner. I've worked in a technical field for decades with engineers, even though I'm not an engineer.
Sure.
So thinking that way and producing that way is
feels natural.
Yeah. There are tapestry weavers who just, especially ones that just are very contemporary and abstract, they'll just get up and they'll just start weaving and filling in things, but that's not the way I do it.
Has your relationship with aging changed through your work?
Yes. I think that in the process of sitting with the aging process and finding images, what I discovered is that there's a yin and a yang to the process. There are really hard things about getting older. There's lots of things you lose, but then at the same time, there's lots of other things that you gain and that are really positive. And so I've been able to kind of sit with and accept the things that are difficult, but also celebrate and appreciate things that are the positive side.
Sure. Have new positive sides emerged? Have you discovered new positive elements through it, or has it just reinforced positive aspects that you felt were there?
It probably built on some of the positive stuff. Like, for instance, there's one down there called Feeling Invisible. And myself, as well as people who I know and are of my age, they talk about feeling more and more invisible as they age. And okay, so maybe that's not such a great thing about aging. But then someone actually in a group like this said, well, that's my superpower.
Yeah.
I can do anything I want now that people aren't paying so much attention. And so, it's kind of a building on or just discovering another dynamic.
And it sounds like a good deal of that came out of maybe not so much doing the work itself, but in showing the work and interacting with viewers. Is that?
Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
Usually when I do an artist talk, I do a few minutes about my background and how I got into it and everything. But then I have people, I have people get up and find an image that they're drawn to. And they go up, and I want them to spend 3 to 5 minutes with it, just really looking at it closely, thinking about how it's hitting them emotionally. Does it remind them of something? Then we come back into the group, and I'll talk about where it came for me, but also people start talking about how it affects them, and I have learned so much. There are insights that I hadn't even thought about in that process.
Are you still building on this series? I mean, is this still generating fresh iterations and new insights for you?
Yes. Since this went up, I just took a piece off my loom, and there's an image of a woman with superimposed on an hourglass. And the thought being, as the sand runs down the hourglass, like we're fewer and fewer years in our lives, the question about, well, what choices am I making given a more limited time? And then there's another one that I've just put on where I have an image of a woman just like, with a big smirk on her face and pearl necklace, and that one is, kind of comes off, it's a privilege to age, because a lot of people don't get that privilege, and we should appreciate the fact that even though we've lost stuff, we're still here, and it's important to appreciate that.
This particular body of work that we have displayed here has great stylistic variety. As viewers go through, they're going to engage with some images that are very photographic in their source, and others that are more abstracted and more stylized. Has that been a linear progression? Did you start in a certain style and then it grew, or are you trying different styles from piece to piece? Tell us about how and why there are different styles that you've played with or worked with.
Well, probably to be honest, I am always trying new things. And so if I'm being too figurative, then it's time to say, well, how can I be more abstract and communicate stuff? But then also the image really kind of tells me what the style should be.
Okay.
So a little combination of both of those.
So it sounds like it would be fair to say it wasn't a linear progression, and that you might do one that's a bit more kind of photographic in its approach, and then one that is more stylized, and you're going back and forth and kind of juggling them throughout your process and practice?
Yes.
Interesting. Are there any of these approaches that you find more satisfying? I mean, it seems like there's evidence that no, but I'm curious, just because sometimes I think artists will do something that resonates with them, but then, many of us have in the back of our head, well, even though we may try to tamp it down, it's like, well, what do people want to see? Does that ever cross your mind?
No.
Okay. So it's always what you're feeling in the moment.
Yes. I think the only kind of current mode or style that I'm working with now is I'm moving away from having so many elements in one piece, or taking something and adding elements to it, like that one, to really focusing in on the face. And that seems, I really like finding a face or creating a face that communicates what I want to communicate and draws somebody in.
Sure. I think experienced folks will say, folks that are engaged in this process and maybe in a similar point in their life as you, these are going to resonate in a way that maybe they can't with a younger person. But what would you hope that a younger person who couldn't possibly like have a natural, intuitive, experiential understanding of it, like what would you hope they get from your work?
I guess I would say that I would like them to appreciate the aging process.
Yeah.
And if it's their mother or their father or their grandparent who is in that stage of life, you know, I hope they have a better appreciation of what they're going through emotionally and what they're dealing with, so they can be more empathetic and also celebrate the aging process with that person.
For sure. Wonderful. We open it up to questions.
Yeah.
Which one was your first, and which one was your last, and do you have a favorite?
Actually, the first one, that was the eye right there. And I took a month-long art session at St. Kate's. And what they instilled in me or tried to bring out was to come up with an image that made a statement about something. And that was at a time when there was a lot of political conversation going on a number of years ago. And we're revisiting.
A number of hours ago?
And so I came up with that image to represent the fact that, you know, even though you had all sorts of people spouting opinions or sharing facts that may or may not be true, it was important to see what the truth was, or to kind of dive into what's really going on. And then that was kind of well, you know, that's what happens when you get older, is you can kind of see through a lot of the stuff that's going on because you've got perspective and you've got experience to kind of sort through things and get into the truth, if there is such a thing. And then the last one that's in this exhibit is this one. And again, I just said, you know, I'm not done. I've got more things to do and more things to share and more things to experience. So that's where that image came. And my favorite, that's usually the last one I did.
Is there one on the loom right now that you're feeling pretty good about?
Yeah.
Yeah. Dynamite.
No.
In this same series?
Yes.
Yeah.
Although I do have to admit that it's easier to be working on a piece that has a kind of a positive message versus one that's still part of the reality of aging, but you know, this one was fun to do. Whereas maybe that one right there was a little harder. I call another passage where you kind of say, well, I got to go through this, whether I like it or not. You know, this is a passage like adolescence or young adulthood. So some are more fun to weave.
You're raising a lot of thoughts in my mind. Number one, do you think about other images as you're working on the one that you're currently doing? Is one thought leading to another thought, and you say, I'm going to go, and this is the next one that's coming along the road? And I didn't hear the answer, how long it takes to do something like this. Because this is really amazing work, and weaving is, I tried weaving, and it's a really difficult proposition, especially with the weft and woof on the thing. And so having to constantly change your coloring, your fibers underneath it. So how long does it take to do?
So, and that follow-up was how long? And that's always the magic question, right? I bet you get that a lot.
Yeah, I do.
And some artists kind of are cagey about that, and others say, well, it took me 50 years because they've been studying all this time to get to that one thing. So where do you land on that spectrum, Susan? Are you can you tell us how long?
Oh yeah, I do keep I do keep track of how long it takes me to do each piece. And obviously, simpler images are faster, more complex images take longer. But basically in the ballpark, I probably spend pretty close to 40, 50 hours doing the design work. And that's just to get it to the cartoon to the loom so that I can start weaving. And then
I'm sorry, just to interrupt, a cartoon, a full-scale drawing of the actual design, not a stylized, not the peanuts, right? It's a cartoon is an art term, just for folks that don't know.
yeah, it would be the pattern
Pattern, there we go.
that I would weave to. So that's a good 40 plus or minus hours. And then I believe this one in particular probably took about 150, 175 hours to weave, do the actual physical weaving and finishing. So it's not a fast medium. So, and that kind of connects to your first question. I typically have something on the loom. I have another under design, and then another one that's kind of brewing in my head. So there's like typically three projects that are in different stages of development.
A follow-up to that, have you ever had one that just didn't turn out? I mean, you thought it was going to work, you made it, and then it didn't land.
I have a couple that I don't like as much as I like others.
Sure.
It's hard not to say I don't like them after I spend that much time doing it.
100%.
But
and, yeah.
some of them I like better than others.
And when did that realization happen quite a bit after you'd completed it, or was it mid-process? Like a painter or a draftsperson, they can make pretty immediate changes, and maybe the time isn't quite as much as this. So, you know, they're researching each and every piece, and one that doesn't quite work out, they learn something they can apply to the next one. But with how labor-intensive these are, I imagine it'd be quite crushing to have one come out that, that didn't quite work the way that I intended.
It's disappointing, but to your part of your question is, I don't see it till I take it off the loom. So I don't know whether I don't know till I take it off the loom whether it hit what I wanted to hit. And that's because, and I can look, that's what I see when I'm weaving. And so I'm seeing the back, and I'm probably weaving it sideways. And even if I go to the other side of my loom to see the front, I walk around the back, I only see about this much at a time because I'm constantly rolling it up on the beam. So it's different than a painter who could kind of say, oh, this is working or not working and I can fix it or I can't fix it. If I don't do my homework and I don't do good design, I really don't know till the end.
It requires a strategic mindset.
Yeah.
So I have a question. As an art appreciator, but not a true artist myself, like how do you work? Do you get up and, like, I know writers who will get up and write, you know, for 5 hours every morning or something like that. How do you do your days or your time to do your artwork? Are you up late at night? I'm just curious.
I get up in the morning and I dedicate my day to it. Now, sometimes going out to lunch with my friends is the priority for the day. So I'll take a break to do that. I guess at this point in time in my life, friends and family are my number one priority. So anytime I can connect that way, that's what will come first in my day. But I do dedicate hours every day. And sometimes when I'm just not feeling it, that's why it's nice to have something on the loom, and I don't have to think about the design stuff. I can just do the meditative, physical production. And then other days, I just kind of like, oh, it's design day. Things are going to come. And so that's why, one of the reasons why I have about 3 things going at the same time, because they're all in different stages.
What materials do you use for the warp and weft? And what exactly is the process? It's not like weaving on a floor loom. It's a different type of loom. Can you explain that a little bit?
For those of you who don't know anything about weaving, there are warp threads that you basically take your weft threads and go in and out of and build up shapes. For the warp threads, I use a seine cotton. It comes from, I believe, Sweden. The reason why you use that is you can put a lot of tension on it, just because you want to be able to put a lot of tension. And then the weft that I use, which is the colored threads, are a combination. I do bundles, a thread or 2 of wool and a thread or 2 of cotton. And the reason why I use cotton is because wool kind of absorbs light, and I want just a little bit of sheen to it. Other people use silk. Some of them have silk in them, again, to give it a little more sheen or shine to it. You said the floor loom. Floor loom is where you're weaving horizontally, and typically that would be used to do placemats or rugs or fabric, and in that technique you're throwing a shuttle of yarn from side to side, and whatever design you have in it is done with treadles and moving the warp threads. With mine, I weave on a 6-foot upright loom, so it's vertical, and it's 6 feet high, 6 feet wide, and I just the warps go pulled forward and back, and I fill in each shape at a time. So I don't weave from side to side. I would weave that heart, and then I'd weave the red around it, or I'd weave the lips, or I'd weave the chin, then I'd weave the lips, and then I'd weave what's around the lips.
Does the shape stay in that place?
Yeah. Mm-hmm. And then you beat it down too, because you can't see any warp threads here. So my goal is to cover warp with only color, which is also different than a floor loom or more of a fabric oriented. And each one of the colors, you can touch these things. Each one of the colors.
Wait a second. While Susan's here, you can touch them.
Each one of the colors is a different bobbin. So I'll have a number of bobbins hanging, paint by numbers with a bobbin. And thank you, Jim. Yes, I don't usually like people to, but you're a special group.
just to be clear, yeah. And Susan, do you work standing up?
No.
Or you sit? Yeah. Okay.
The Braille, I want to know what that says. And then I was wondering if that's Morse code on the one to just to the left of that.
No, it is not Morse.
Okay.
I was just trying to come up with an image that talked about movement or passage. The Braille says, one says, I'm always with you, one says listen, and one says wisdom. I'll repeat those. Is it your mother? I am with you, listen, and wisdom.
I was just wondering if you've ever considered doing a self-portrait.
Well,
There it is.
Now, where that came from is one of my dear friends has Parkinson's, and in talking to her about what that was translating to her, what she was thinking, she said, I just have to reimagine my life. All the planning I've done, all the assumptions I've made are kind of going out the window, and I have to reimagine what my life can be going forward. And I thought, well, that's nothing anybody can do for her other than her, and she has to go deep inside her to figure that out. And so I used myself in an image of kind of going down deep to go through that process.
Susan, thank you so much for sharing your work with our community.
Thank you. Thank you.
We've been speaking with Susan Gangsei about her exhibition, The Sacred Journey of Aging, on view now through December 1st, 2024.